Yes, y'all. Another Tuesday, another episode of The Void. And on the deck, well, I guess on the beats, we got Rock beats per the usual. Hold on a second. We gotta deal with what we got. Hold on, let me turn that off. So, what is up, YouTube folks out there? Looks like we got one person out of the billions of people on this planet hanging out. Hold on, let me adjust this camera. We are in the shop studios. Latest project. Got a classic Mercedes in the background, 66. I think it's a 66. Pretty sure. Anyway, tonight we have, what are we talking about? Self-help. Solipsism of self-help. So the interesting thing is right now, in the beginning, 9 p.m. Eastern Time on Tuesday, in the shop studios in Duval County, which doesn't seem like we're on a curfew tonight. Everyone got a message via mobile device, I believe, and probably was notified in the area that we had a curfew. Sort of freaky deaky stuff. So it sort of goes along with this, excuse me, this self-help theme. That stand by, I'm gonna make some adjustments. Self-help theme, right? So there was in the title of the video. It's called Solipsism, or the Solipsism of self-help, right? So let's in a previous episode we talked about briefly. We looked at the definition of solipsism. So let me share that with you guys. God, I hope I can make this work. See, one of these days we're gonna have. That's not what I wanted to happen. All right, hold on. All right, so this is, I guess you get to see the whole, I don't know, it's not edited, so here, whatever is on there. Okay, so there you go. Solipsism, excuse me, the view or theory that the self is all that can be known to exist, right? And then there's this, I don't know, what is this, Wikipedia. Okay, so what does Wikipedia say? Solipsism is the philosophical idea that only one's mind is sure to exist. As an epistemological position, epistemology being sort of what can be known. So like this sort of school of knowledge, I guess a framework of thinking in a way. Anyway, as an epistemological position, solipsism holds that knowledge of anything outside of one's own mind is unsure, right? The external world and other minds cannot be known and might not exist outside the mind, right? So think of the significance of what that means, right? Solipsism. This idea that the inventions and concoction, or this idea that, for instance, if I am a solipsist and I truly believe in this notion of solipsism.
Is there a time that he should be on?
Whenever. It's on right now.
Okay,
It's
I'll
live.
call him.
Yeah.
And then should he Skype in?
Sure, if he
Does he
wants
have
to.
a number to Skype in on?
Zhagg, Z-H-A, at hot, Z-H-A-G-G at hotmail.com.
ZHAGG.
At hotmail.com. That's anybody that wants to get on Skype, ZHAGG at hotmail.com. The link should be in the description on the YouTube. Link should be on the description on the YouTube. We have folks that might be jumping in to be, I think there's maybe somebody who is actually a politician or running for an office locally in Florida. We may be able to talk to them about some issues. I don't know. So it may derail a little bit off of that, but maybe we could loop them back. I don't know. Let's talk about it. I don't know who's even coming on. Who's even on with me now? We got one person out of the billions of people in the world. We have one person on. Say something in the live chat if you'd like. You don't have to. You could just listen right now. This is consisting sort of the ramblings of some old dude in a shop that's talking about this notion of solipsism. Again, going back to um, if I, pardon me, let me take a moment. If I were,
Babe, sorry, is there a dial-in that he could use?
I mean, he can maybe call my phone, I guess,
Okay, got it.
and I'll, yeah. I don't have my phone. All right, I don't have my phone. So YouTube people know I don't have my phone. Okay. What was I talking about? If I was an ardent or staunch, what do you call it, solipsist, then I would say, then if you were standing in front of me, or let's say the one person that's on out of the billions of people that are on this planet, if I'm a solipsist, then you watching this show is a figment of my subconscious, maybe as a projection for my consciousness, or basically the world around. It's sort of like the Matrix, except it's not necessarily dependent on like some future world of computer and robot like ownership kind of thing. It doesn't that's not a requisite. In a way, it's like only you exist. So therefore, I'm a figment of your imagination in service to you. And likewise, I am generating the universe, and you are simply a figment of my imagination for my consumption. Right? You start to see where, yeah, I can't really prove that this isn't the case per se, other than if I died, that that the fact that the universe doesn't end, right? But then, as far as I'm concerned, it did. But then again, since if someone died around you, they would have been a figment of your subconscious for your conscious anyway, so they didn't really die. Blah blah. It starts getting weird, right? So that being said, it's really a metaphor. So I'm not saying the self-help folks and the self-help gurus. Superfan Chris is on What Is Up out of the billions of people. We have two people on, very unique people in the world. So you should be very proud. I mean, but that doesn't mean don't tell your friends. You can still be very exclusive in the billions of people, even if we had a huge crowd. In fact, the more people we have, the better, I think, because we can get into more robust conversations, I believe. But anyway.
Did you say that you do or don't have your phone?
I don't have my phone on me.
I think it's in a car.
What was I saying? Yes, so self-help. The thing that I've noticed out of sort of these self-help gurus and self-help programs and things that I've seen is this almost this notion as if where they walk around the like reality almost as if you project or create your own reality, like a solipsist in a way. And it becomes sort of weird if we're really a world of people who actually live in the physical realm and are made of like, cells and muscle and bone, and we interact with each other, and we have spheres of influence that sometimes touch, that sometimes the events that I put into motion affect other people and vice versa. So we're this interconnected web. And what ends up happening is a lot of times I feel like you see a lot of self-help that talks about things as if there's this very centered... Is he calling in?
He said he'll be home in just a minute, so he said he'll Skype in, but
okay,
just in case he changes his mind, there's your phone.
So, I don't remember what we're talking about. Anyway, so solipsism, we are looking at a situation where people... Oh, yes. So the self-help stuff almost is a lot of the stuff is going to a point where they are trying to do stuff like like reference quantum physics. They want to talk about um, these sort of not really even new discoveries that are happening in science, but these discoveries that are still unaccessible to general knowledge because it's inaccessible to the best brains. I mean, the people who are on the forefront, some of them, to hear them actually describe quantum physics, to hear them describe um, the things that they're starting to understand at subatomic levels, at these levels of super infinitely, almost infinitely small dimensions, things start working differently and things act just like all sorts of stuff is different. And even at the other end of the spectrum, at very large things, at the universe scale of things, um, I think as Richard Feynman, world leading physicist, said, if you think you understand quantum physics, then you don't. And that's one of the major sort of running themes with people who are actually still regarded at the forefront of physics and human accumulated knowledge in that realm of actually trying to accumulate robust knowledge of our universe, right? Which is a long-standing tradition of trying to understand the world. There are also scientists, quote unquote, who maybe have made it through their credentialing and have found their way to create the snake oil out of the contemporary understanding of or misunderstandings of science. So you get people that are, and I can't remember their exact names. I know there's a couple on YouTube. Maybe it's not even good to name drop. Maybe it is, so that you guys can check it out for yourself. But there's a buddy of mine who's really deep into it. He, I get really frustrated with him. He claims stuff like if you have a positive mindset and you have the correct mineral balance, that you'll never get cancer, and you'll never get viral infection, and you'll never get this or that or whatever. And I'm like, man, that's like really hanging it out there because how do you gauge this? How do you matriculate or graduate somehow like positive thinking or who's really calling the shots on what mineral balance really means or whatever, or your vibration, if you don't let your vibration of your heart, you know uh, what's it like, harmonize with some nature thing or whatever, right? Some hoo-ha something, and it sounds like mysterious and mystic and whatever, and people are like, oh yeah, I need to like resonate my heart with some. How do you do that? Please quantify exactly how you do that. Can we make it a repetitive process, a la scientific method, right? That you make a claim, you substantiate your claim, it could be repeated by other parties replicating your methods, right? And getting similar or same results, right? So that's part of science. But these these sort of mystics that quote, double slit experiment, or try to talk about superposition, or talk about Schrodinger's cat, or these misquotes of physics constantly. They're going around trying to sell how to, self-help books on how to resonate your frequency with, with with what's his name, with Heisenberg's equation or some crap. It's like they're just spouting. Like, I'll talk to this guy and he just starts saying, it's science, bro. It's science. The double slit experiment. It's science. It's quantum physics. I'm like, what about the double slit experiment? Bro, it is, man. When you check it out, you'll see. When you look at it, when you measure it, that's when it becomes. So it all comes with your consciousness. I'm like, dude, that that idea was looked at as what's his name, Heisenberg, was putting together the uncertainty principle, this idea that reality would collapse and then just suddenly happen just because you did something was sort of like a hole in the boat. Like, haha, that doesn't make sense. It's like an anomaly. Like, it didn't make sense. That has become, and it's something to reconcile. The people now, again, who are still on the forefront of science, they're talking about this knowledge that we have now as being sort of a stepping stone knowledge. It's not the all encompassing, full on, for sure knowledge. It is sort of like, I can't remember, God, what was the name? It's provisional. It's a provisional step, meaning that it's what we understand now, but we need further access to something. And another one I saw, I think it was either this today or previously, yesterday maybe. There was a scientist that was talking about just the limits of our, freaking monkey brains. We got this gray mush between our ears, and we're trying to try to fundamentally understand the meaning not even meaning, but like the intricacies of how the universe works around us. We're definitely going beyond hunter-gatherer shit at this point. We're trying to figure out some deep level shit, and for most of us, it's hard to, outside of 3 dimensions, it's hard to think about the 4th dimension of time as a 4th dimension. What's the 5th dimension? And reality, in order to meet both experimental and mathematical guidelines and models, needs probably about 11 dimensions to work. So can your monkey brain, my monkey brain, has a fucking hard time trying to wrap its head around the idea of a 5th dimension. What the hell is that? What does that look like? What the fuck? It's beyond time. It's also beyond the 3 dimensions. What the hell else is this next dimension? I don't know. That's hard for me to fathom. It's tricky for me to try to fathom this thing at the 5th dimension, let alone 6th dimension, 7th, all the way to 11th dimension. That's like, well, it makes no sense. It's like I was telling a friend of mine, I'll talk to my brother. He's a PhD, theoretical physicist. Actually, he's theoretical slash, he develops the apparatus to detect subatomic particles and individual photons, things like that, like super crazy, delicate stuff. He has to come up with not only does he have to understand the stuff, he has to understand it enough to understand how to manipulate the stuff so that our monkey brain can understand and read what happened at the subatomic level that we can't sense, and we just have to trust that something's happening. And what he can do is sort of translate this event into blips and bloops and lights and some dial shit that in our monkey brain we realize some shit just happened. Right? So that's where things start to get really kooky, because even the most advanced folks will tell you this is I don't know how to explain this to you. That some of these folks don't understand enough to a degree to be able to dumb it down enough for the other chimpanzees, basically, the other monkey brains, the upright walking hairless monkey brains, to figure this shit out, because it's beyond most people's comprehension. It's definitely way out there. And I was talking about to a friend of mine about how trying to keep up with my brother when he explains subatomic particles, when he tries to explain sort of what the latest understanding of the differences between photons and electrons and how they actually exist in the real world, and whether what
he's about to call in.
oh, okay, and whether or not they even do exist in the real world, all these kinds of things, it becomes really this crazy. It's crazy. I can't keep up. I feel like it's like trying to run with someone who just is in better shape, and the further you guys run together, the further they go into the distance. Like, how do you keep up? And that's how I sometimes feel, right? So we live in a universe that's incomprehensible to even the brightest minds among us. And we have these who I believe are truly charlatans that go around and sort of talk about this like answer using quantum physics and these mystical sort of discussions of the forefronts of science, right? That consciousness may or may not be a calculation from our actual physical brains, or maybe we tune into it. Maybe it has to do with quantum physics and these special growths within your neural network and these microtubules and things like that. But it doesn't necessarily mean that if I really want cotton candy really bad and I think about it super hard, that I'm going to suddenly get some cotton candy. All right, so I think we're supposed to have a guest calling in. Let me double check. Stand by one moment. Let me put on some separate. Jared, can you hear me? Jared, can you hear us? No, it doesn't look like we have Jared on. Let's see, Jared, are you on with us? Alright, maybe. I don't know. Jared, can you hear me now?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Hey, people out in YouTube, I need your help. You're not. Things are like, so this is a ragtag operation that I run out of my shop. I call it the shop studios. So, stand by one moment while I get this all put back together.
Okay.
All right, so I have you on speakerphone. I hope. Well, I think it'll work. Hopefully, people can hear you. Okay.
Can you hear me? Is there a better way? Do you want me to call in?
Skype probably works the best, but as far
Let me
as
download Skype.
what was that?
Let me download Skype.
Okay, and people may or may not be able to hear you. I don't have any feedback yet from my folks just yet, but who knows? They'll probably let me know here in a minute, I believe.
I'm downloading Skype right now, so can you just text me your contact information on Skype?
Sure. Yep. I'll do that, and then and I'll patch you right in.
All right, give me 30 seconds, and then I will Skype you.
You got it. All right.
Thanks.
Bye. All right, guys. So I'm trying to get Jared West on the line, and you know what? Nothing's working. Now I can't even get my freaking camera. Seriously. I mean, okay, there's that. Oh my God, you gotta be kidding me. All right, is this it? Come on. Honestly, I don't even know how to get my. Okay, is this okay? Holy Jesus, you gotta be kidding me. Camera doesn't mean. Oh my God. In this alternate universe, camera doesn't mean camera in my camera universe. All right, so looks like we got 3 people out of the billions of folks. Let me also get Jared West. Jared West is running for district. What did he say? 41. I don't remember. He's gonna introduce it. I was sorry for the delay. Hopefully you enjoyed the Sep Rock Beats track number 234 entitled Shots. Let's see. And by the way, if you guys want to Skype in and say something and join the conversation, and you can simply get on Skype and it's zhagg@hotmail.com is the email address. And I believe Jared should be tuning in or Skyping in, and we should be able to, hopefully the audio will work. Please give me feedback if it works. Looks like we do have, yes, I did have him on speakerphone. I think we're going to do the Skype thing. We're going to try that out. Hopefully it'll work. I always have these technology problems. I don't know if it's just because I'm on the cusp of boomerdom, being Gen X, or not. So I sort of understand technology, but it also eludes me in a weird way as I get older for no reason. That's boomerism. Like my dad, born 1950. Like he was a sort of early adopter, I guess, to computers. But pardon me. I remember being a kid in the 80s, and we had an Atari ST computer in the 80s, you know. And it basically looked like Windows, and it had word processing and games and different things like that. Now, of course, it didn't make it past like Compaq and IBM, Atari went as far as their personal computer stuff. Um, but he did all sorts of stuff on, it used DOS. It was pretty, simple, and even then it had a graphic interface like Windows style graphic interface, or you could move into like DOS style direct lane, command. And I mean, I remember he would set up a computer, change the hard drive, upgrade the RAM, do all this stuff, program it, create new directories and da da da, and do all this different stuff. It's not even that complex. If someone was in a computer science major and they heard me talk about this, they'd be like, "That's so basic and simple." Exactly, that's my point. And yet now he has to call my sister up or somebody up to help him set up his Wi-Fi. And it's like, doesn't make sense to me. I'm like, dude, you were doing much more complex computer crap than this. Like back then, like why can't you just input a sequence of numbers that says password and everything is gonna work? You know what I mean? You used to be able to like upgrade the RAM in a computer, or like you'd be able to navigate your way through different directories and drives in DOS. And now it's like you can't set up Wi-Fi in your house. It doesn't make sense. So like when all these boomers and stuff get all weird about technology, I'm like, it's not like it's super duper new. And in fact, technology was more cumbersome and weird, and you navigated it. And now it's like easier, and it's like, oh, I can't figure it out. Help me. And so I don't know if it's like learned helplessness or what it is. Okay, this looks like it must be Jared. All right, hello, you are on the Boyd.
How is this?
Awesome. Okay, so you can hear me okay and everything?
Yes.
All right, and I believe everyone can hear you. If you can't hear Jared, then let me know, please, in the comments. So, Jared West, please introduce yourself, and thank you, by the way, for jumping on the Boyd, this Fellowship of Truth, where we sort of gather and chop our way through the jungle of bullshit that we find ourselves living in right now.
Okay, so, first of all, thank you so much for having me. I'm Jared West, the Democratic candidate for House District 41, which is in Polk County, Haines City, Davenport, Winter Haven area. Before I introduce myself any further, though, let's just take a moment of silence for George Floyd.
No doubt.
So. Okay. All right. Thanks.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Once again, I'm Jared West, Democratic candidate for House District 41. I'm running here because making a community better means talking about the hard truths. And in the case of Polk County, there are structural issues preventing the hardworking people of this county from getting ahead. Hard work is the backbone of our country, our state, and our community. Yet despite how hard the people in Polk County are working, the American dream is farther away from reality than ever. And that's why I'm running. So that's me, and so I'm doing it.
Wow. Well, so like, what was there a specific point that sort of motivated you to action or to run for office?
So I grew up in Indiana, where Mike Pence is from. I am, or I guess was, the only openly gay male, in that town. So from a very early age, I had to learn how to be tough and be a fighter because, like my life literally depended on it.
Wow.
And growing up there, I was under attack so much. It was difficult. Mike Pence passed religious freedom laws where gay people could be discriminated against. He passed laws, where police could pull over people who are Hispanic and ask them for their green card. There was an HIV outbreak because of a drug epidemic, and instead of facing that issue, they blamed it on gay people. And Indiana doesn't have a gay people problem; it has a pandemic problem. And
Well,
so
what
I
kind of
just
how did what did they what kind of things did they do to sort of move the narrative that way?
Oh, so for example, like with religious freedom, I'm the only openly gay guy from Walkerton, Indiana. There's a pizza place there called Memories Pizza, which made national news because they said they wouldn't serve their food at gay weddings,
Oh wow.
And being the only openly gay male from that town, like no one wants their pizza at a wedding anyway. But Mike Pence, sort of empowered these people to make these decisions and, be able to discriminate against people. And there's kind of like a certain level of irony in that because now, businesses are able to turn people away for not wearing masks. And, you find these same people who supported that, feeling outraged because a business can turn them away for not wearing a mask.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, there's all sorts of sort of weird contradictory things that are going on in certain. I don't know if you want to call it narratives or ethos
Uh,
or.
there are so many, like, for example, here in Polk County right now, I'm sure you know who, Sheriff Grady Judd is. He,
I don't know much about anything actually. I hardly can keep up with Duval County.
yeah. Well, Grady Judd is a friend of Donald Trump's.
Uh,
He's the Polk County Sheriff, and he has a national platform because of his friendship. And so today, for example, he says looters should be shot. The thing is that here in Polk County, there hasn't been a single incident of looting. And so now he's trying to paint this narrative that doesn't even exist. Like, I live in Polk County. There hasn't been one single looting incident. And so, for this man to have a national platform and and to call on these people to be shot when it's not even something that's happening here, I think this says a lot about him.
wow. Well, I mean, there's. I don't know if we want to jump right into it right now, but well, maybe. I mean, what's your take on if we look at sort of glossing, and I apologize, but in a way glossing over sort of the impetus for you to jump in and make changes to now this immediate like craziness that we're in the middle of this mayhem that's happening. What's your
I'm going
take
to stop
on
you
sort
right
of
there.
the
I don't
cultural
I
feel
don't even
that's going
you know
on in America?
I don't even think it's mayhem. You know, this is something for me that I think hits home. Um, my husband, who's a black man, we just celebrated 4 years of marriage. And we'd been together a few years before we got married. Uh, in 2015, his cousin Max Gracia here in Orlando was just out walking, and there was a gas station robbery in the area at the time. And because Max fit the description, as a black male, um, a cop came up behind him. Rather than speaking to him at all, the cop just went ahead and released the canines. So, he's
Whoa.
just walking. I've seen the video of this whole thing. He's just walking. The cop said nothing to him, released the dogs on him. He ran into the water. So while he's in the water, these dogs are biting him up. They end up
So they
arresting
jump
him
in
and
the
taking
water
him to
with
Orange County
him.
Jail. While
They
he's in
jumped
jail,
into the water.
huh?
They jumped into the water after him and were tearing him up. In
Yeah, he was about shin deep in the water.
wow.
So while he's in the water, these dogs are tearing him up. Anyway, the police end up apprehending him and taking him to jail. So the next day, he he requested some medical assistance because he had open wounds, and they just mocked at him, laughed at him, and didn't provide him treatment. And the day after that, he died in jail. And this is a real
Wow.
thing. His name is Max Gracia. That's my husband's cousin. You can look it up. And so, all these people, rather than being held accountable, just resigned from their jobs. And so my husband's family, since 2015, has been suing the Orange County Jail. And the worst part is that, a few days after Max had passed away, they actually arrested the person who did commit the crime. He was falsely arrested.
Wow.
And they only arrested him because he's a black man that fit the description.
Right, and I think we see a lot of times this sort of disconnect between the reality of this idea that you may fit a description of something else that has nothing to do with you, and now you're paying the consequence of that now, and
Yeah,
that's something I
Max.
think that's so foreign to especially to most white people. I would say they
Uh,
don't. There's
uh,
no white
yeah,
people I know that put their driver's license or insurance or registration out in the open before they start driving, just in case, especially at night, so that they don't look like they're reaching. Like that's not a white experience that I know of.
no, you are so right. And you always hear about these things happening, but so many people, and especially white people, just don't have that personal connection to it. And unfortunately, my husband and I have lived it firsthand, and it's a very real. And so I feel incredibly bad for his family, because every time something like this happens, they end up having to go to counseling again, and it triggers them, and it's incredibly. I don't even want to say the word sad, because it's so much more than that. Uh,
Yeah.
that's
Well, it just I've been trying to like well, all right. I'll try to explain something. So I have this sort of really extremely dickish personality on Facebook. Where like I don't go out and pick fights but when somebody is virtue signaling hardcore, especially conservative virtue signaling, or if there is some kind of really silly argument I see floating around, and especially if someone's being real smug about it, I'll do like the Sylvester Stallone over the top kind of like arm wrestle, bam, and like become extra dickish, and fight fire with fire. And one of the things I've been trying to explain to some people is not like the almost helpless feeling that this hopeless feeling almost when you attend a BLM rally or protest. I was just at a George Floyd protest here in Jacksonville, literally minutes before it turned violent and weird and whatever, and everything was pretty chill. I mean it was hot and really like miserable all day, but it was like nothing happened. It was really actually sort of, as far as peaceful protests go, it was probably pretty good. And it it was like have you watched the movie Get Out?
I have seen Get Out.
Okay, so you
It's been
know
a
about the sunken place and all that, right? it
yeah.
it was like feeling like, what are we even doing? Does anyone even care? We're standing on the steps of the courthouse. Does anyone even care? We're standing in front of the police station chanting and lamenting the people. Do they even care? I was here years ago for a BLM rally for a different name. You know what I mean? So to me, like, I just couldn't help, and I'm not even the one who has to put my shit on my dashboard so that I don't look like I'm reaching. You know what I'm saying? I'm not even the one who's really affected, and I feel helpless, and I wonder what the hell are we even accomplishing out here? And I can't even imagine how folks that really like live or die by whether or not things change. How would you how can that feel? You know what I mean? And then trying to talk to people who have zero clue, who want to talk about the looters and protesters like they're the same thing. And I'm like, wait, let me ask you, when's the last time you, in capital letters, you were at a peaceful protest and you stopped instigators? You got in the way of instigators and whatever they planned on doing. And practically nobody that equates the protesters and the looters as the same thing. Nobody has actually, that I've actually confronted with that, has actually been in a peaceful protest ever. And now they want to talk about how the protesters should have been taking control over the looters and this and that. I'm like, I was there at the George Floyd. There was only one guy really that I saw, and he looked like he was probably on something. He was throwing up gang signs. I recognized them from back in my, not proud of my, I know some gang signs, put it that way. Anyway, he's throwing up gang signs. He's set tripping a little bit with his hands in front of the cops. He's got a bandana on, da da da. And he's like walking up on people's cars while people are driving. You know, he's like walking on the hood, walking on the windshield, jumping on the roof. I'm like, oh my God, dude, what the hell? But this guy looks whacked out, and he's just running up the street. And I'm like, I don't know if I'm going to like be the dude that stops the guy. I don't know. Now he's sort of run away. And so now I'm like, I don't want to catch him now. Someone else can stop him. And meanwhile, now he's jumping on, literally jumps on top of a cop car. Right? And it's like, oh my God, what are you doing? Right? And people are yelling at him, but he's out of control. What are we supposed to do? And there's, you know what I mean? And there's people that are like, whoa, well, if anyone cares about police or, you know, changing the justice system, this is the wrong way to do it. I'm like, the looters don't give a crap. They're different, you know? But what do you think about as far as, I keep hearing about a cultural divide. And I hear a lot of, especially on the right-wing side of things, conservative rhetoric about a civil war, or even this term, the boogaloo. Have you heard weird stuff like that?
I don't even know where to begin with this question because, well, I would like to back up before I answer this a little bit.
Sure.
And I would like to say I have been in a situation where I have been tear gassed 3 separate times.
Wow.
I attended the NATO and G8 summit in Chicago. I think it was in 2010. And I was exposed to rubber bullets and tear gas there. A couple others. Anyway, I think that, you know, a lot of the right wing tries to paint this false narrative so they can, move forward their agenda, which is completely, I don't even know how to say it. What they're trying to do to me is appalling. And, they create this false narrative that doesn't exist. To try and push their agenda forward. And, for example, like, they had all of these like Open Up America protests a few weeks ago. Could you imagine if 100 armed black men went into a state house? You know what I mean?
Right. Yes.
It would not end up the same way theirs did. And now, people are appalled at these peaceful protests, which, I went to one in Lakeland on Sunday. It was, super peaceful. I saw a guy, he was wearing a Trump shirt. He encouraged people to march on the police station. And the next thing you know, people started getting tear gassed and stuff. So it's one of the other times I got tear gassed. I think they're trying to, swoop into these situations and take advantage of them to push their narrative, which I think is completely disgusting because, most of these people don't believe that these things exist. And even if they do believe it, they don't care. But I firsthand know what it's like to have lived through that. And, my husband, like I said, every time this happens, ends up having to get counseling because it just re-triggers him. And at the end of the day, it, it it's not acceptable. And I feel like we're at the point where these people pushing the same narrative are also trying to incite a civil war or something like that because they feel like their voice. And they feel empowered because of our current president, and so most of them are opportunists, and of course they're going to take advantage of this prime situation they have because as soon as we get another president, they're going to have to go back and hide again because they don't have someone who will champion for them when you know when it matters to them. And so what I always say to people, like when they're talking about the riots and the looters, is like, it's unfortunate that businesses are getting hit and destroyed. But what's more unfortunate is that the police kill people in broad daylight, and you're okay with it. So, I don't know which side you're on here, but at the end of the day, business can rebuild, but you can't replace a life. And I don't want to keep saying Max Gracia, but his name was Max Gracia. That was my husband's cousin. They grew up together. And he was killed at the hands of police and was arrested falsely. And so excuse my language, but I have a hard time giving a fuck when, people try and what I consider white splainness to me. As a white guy, uh, I have firsthand experienced this, sort of heartbreak, and it's not acceptable.
Well, absolutely. Well, that's where I end up. So people call me a condescending asshole and whatever when I make my points online. But I purposely go out and sort of throw that viewpoint out. Like I had this. There's this guy that I knew from Air National Guard a long time ago, and he's that's my favorite target is to find the capitalist conservative service member. These are people whose whole existence is based on the teat of the taxpayer, a collective experience, and they hate the government. And they're capitalist sycophants. They love capitalism, but they escaped capitalism's actual machinery to work for the government, to work for the collective, and they want to destroy. There's tax protesters that are in the ranks of the government. It's like you are like how hypocritical and how little self awareness do you have to have? There's high ranking military members that I've heard of that are um, tax rebels, and they are high ranking military government employees. So that's how disconnected some of these folks are. And they'll just say with the smugness
You
about.
can't even call it. I'm sorry to interrupt you,
No,
but
go
you
for it.
can't even call it disconnect. These people live in fantasy land. Like it, it's not disconnect. It's a complete disregard for reality.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
I mean
so there's,
it really is, but how do you explain that to somebody?
You can't because, 9 times out of 10, they don't want to hear it. You can't even, like, I have a friend, and bless her heart, she, at the end of the day, is a great person. She was always supportive of my husband and I. She came to our wedding, but she has always been, in my opinion, on the wrong side of things. And just today, actually, uh, she ended up blocking me, and
Mm.
that was really hurtful. But she couldn't see how wrong she was, and you know, it's so hard to explain, how empowered people feel, or how right they feel, but you're never right when it involves harming other people.
Mm. Oh, well, what was like? What was the latest take that was really the breaking point between you guys,
Okay,
or
so
with this? What was the issue?
I posted a status, and I'll read it to you. Give me a second to pull it up.
Sure.
I said, I can't help but feel a huge amount of irony as I watch Republicans who claim to be constitutionalists support activating curfews and our own military against Americans.
Mm.
And she said, would you rather watch every business burn to the ground? And so I let her have it, you know?
Mm.
Like, are we really going to talk about businesses when there are people being killed, Americans being killed? And not to mention, you call yourself a constitutionalist, but you support our own government activating our military against us.
Right.
That is not something that a democracy does. That is an act of an authoritarian or a dictator. Like, it stresses me out. It you A
Well,
democracy does not use its military against its own people. And if you don't see a problem in that, you you know you have issues.
but I think one of the, you can't help but hear the frustration that you feel with people who look at reality so obtusely, without any kind of context. But I think one of the root issues that I see, when I hear you describe her take on it, it's a common theme, and I think the reason why they don't look at things the same way is because they have dehumanized the person that is the victim of whatever, in this
They
case,
have
talking
they
about
they have
police violence,
they have
or yeah,
yes.
it doesn't matter if we were talking about indigenous peoples or anything. They will look at them as a monolithic block of a label, not as human beings, not as that, not like them. They're not like them. You know what I mean?
and
They're
and
different.
I get so, like, I'm a first time candidate, and so I shouldn't be speaking this way, but fuck that. Like, it's disgusting. Uh, there are real issues people are facing. Like, people are being murdered in broad daylight. In addition to that, like, Florida, for example, has been controlled by Republicans for over 20 years, and while they continue that control, we're having this situation where housing is increasing because they're all getting donations from realtors and developers. And they just recently stripped power from municipalities to dictate developers having to set aside a certain amount of the new development for affordable housing. And so
Mm.
people are getting priced out, and they're gentrifying these areas, all of Florida, with people from out of state who have a lot of money who then continue to support them. And
Right.
meanwhile, we have this crisis like here in Polk County where 22.4% of our children are food insecure. 22.4% of Polk County's children are food insecure. So that's one fourth
So
almost.
what's the current, like what's the sort of quote unquote solution as is now?
Well, my opponent doesn't have one. If you look at his voting record, he talks a big game, but when it comes time to vote, you know, he doesn't support his constituents at all. And so there needs to be, and this goes for almost all of Florida, especially with, things right now are so on party lines. It's, and this is something that was created by Donald Trump, but, people aren't willing to work across the aisle. And so, we need people like myself or like, Aaron, who just decided today to run, that will be willing to work across the aisle
Mm,
and resolve these problems. It's not just something that you can come in here and have all of these ideas and say I'm going to fix this. You have to work across the aisle to do it.
right. Well,
And
but do you think that across the quote unquote divide, that the Trump supporters and those people that are disconnected, like you said, they're really looking at a different reality that a lot of times they've concocted. So how do you reconcile that? You're dealing with people who literally look at reality in a completely different perception.
I don't think you can reconcile it. I think that
Like, how do you
you
work
know
across the sort of aisle, I guess, metaphorically, or whatever, or literally, I guess you'd have to
you
figure it
you
out.
you you make them lose. You
Oh, I
you
see.
hold the elected officials accountable so that these people who have this extreme disconnect can go back into hiding where they belong. You you can't, nor am I willing to work with someone who is a racist ever. Um,
Sure.
and and so you need to, the only way you can win is literally to win. And the more voices we have, the more we're going to be able to accomplish. And so we need to get out the vote.
Yeah.
It's as simple as that.
What do you think? Do you think young people are voting?
I don't.
I heard that there's a lot of young people just sitting it out.
I'm a young person. I'm 30 years old. And I don't think a lot of young people are voting, and I think they have every reason to not vote because, for example, in 2016, Hillary Clinton won by 3 million votes, but still lost to Trump. But also, in that same election, there was some pretty clear evidence that the DNC favored Hillary over another candidate,
Sure.
which I think, kind of made people feel that sort of disconnect and isolation because of those actions as well. And so it's going to take young people at a local level, again like myself or like Aaron running
Right.
to kind of like start to gain that trust again in the system as a whole, because the trust is not there, and rightfully so.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think well, one of the things that makes me, I think gives me some hope is I think people are starting to see what's happening, and that there are more and more folks that are raising their hand to try to make a difference. But you
No, we
also
we
have
don't
that.
have a choice. We
Right.
have to do
Yes, it
it.
is it's laying on the shoulders of the new generations. Gen Z, the millennials. I lament that Gen X didn't do more, but there's generational studies that I've seen that don't even include Gen X anymore. They just either get lumped into millennial or they get lumped into boomers now. So I mean, I'm like, I think like, well, I guess there's still time for my generation to make a difference, but it's like, hurry up. We grew up on like Zach De La Roca. We grew up on Rage Against the Machine and Diggable Planets and the Coup and people like talking about critiquing the system. And I mean, the Coup had a album called "Kill My Landlord" or something like that, and it
And
talked about
and
communist
look at
revolution and stuff, and that was during the '90s, and I think Gen X, like the Boomers, sort of succumbed to the capitalist reality of either you go along with this game or you be homeless,
well,
or
look at Rage Against the Machine. Perfect example. Rage
yeah.
Against the Machine. They were supposed to headline Coachella this year,
Mm.
which was delayed because of COVID-19. But uh, I found that kind of striking in itself. Because of everything they represent, and now they're headlining Coachella, which used to be a great music festival, but now it represents everything that is about capitalism, and so
Well,
you know.
yeah, and that's the thing too. On one hand, there is an irony to it, but at the same time, we have to remember that Zach De La Roca and the rest of Rage are, they're living in the same capitalist reality, so they have to eke their living somehow too. And so I can't fault them too much, and I'm sort of glad that they were able to get a spot because they're sort of old school, and who wants to see a bunch of old dudes doing their thing? You know what I mean?
Well,
When they
they
could go
have to
see
make their
fresh
living
new
just like I
people.
have to make my donations. I'm not
Exactly.
going to take.
Right.
I don't take donations from things I don't agree with. So
Oh, touche.
uh, I
That's
don't think
right.
that's
Yeah.
a good
So yeah, they could
representation
they could
of
take a stand against Coachella. That's true.
you know.
Yeah. Well, and maybe, yeah, maybe they legit sold out. You know, and just maybe they aren't willing to look at it that deep. You know,
Yeah.
and I think you're
Well,
right. I think it's those sacrifices and those payments. I was talking to someone at Democracy at Work, and he kept talking about making changes through what payments you make. Who do you support? Who do you donate to? Who do you buy from? Who do in any way that you use commerce or donation, who is it that you're supporting and what ideology are you supporting? And the crazy thing is, there's a lot of different. I think with, of course, well, first of all, in my opinion, this discussion about left, right, conservative, liberal, a lot of that, it could have some academia reality to how we discuss things, but a lot of the actual narrative is just a concocted mess for us to fight each other about. And there's a few core issues, and for me, I feel like all of this, everything from to a large degree, race relations, to LGBTQ relations, to any kind of intersectionality of some type of either oppressor class or something like that, can be mitigated or eliminated by making one cultural shift, a cultural awareness, awakening. And it's not as spiritual as it sounds. It's simple as this. We decided we're not okay owning people. We should now say it's not okay to rent people. And
well,
then,
we decided that in the '60s, and yet it's still happening. So
well, right, we didn't really fundamentally change anything, though. We didn't change the wage system or put together guarantees that someone who's stuck with an enterprise for 10 years or more automatically vests in some type of equity in that and some type of democratic control over of the share of profit that they help build. I think, and then it sounds like, well, that sounds either sort of nerdy and nebulous, like how's that going to change things? But or it sounds like almost too simple. Like, how is that going to change anything? And the big thing is that because you're now treating people as partners and not as tools, now they, just like a shareholder, will receive equity if the stuff, if the what's it called, the enterprise gets sold, they get a piece of that. Or if let's say they put in 10 years worth of service and they decide they want out, now they have 10 years worth of equity that they can cash in for capital infusion and go start a business, go live off of it. They can maybe get dividend income for 10 years because they have ownership in this enterprise. So in effect, they get their time back. So now, imagine if you had every quarter you had, let's say, 3 grand coming in every 3 months from your dividend from working at some place for a bunch of years. Right? There's a lot of people that have worked at some place for 10 years, 12 years, in our society, 7 years. That's a big chunk of time to dedicate from your life. And to say, you hear the libertarian argument that, well, these people got paid a wage that they agreed to. And my argument is, if you don't already have resources like money or skill or something like that, you can't just go start your own business.
No, hell
You
no.
you have to
Okay,
go
so
work for someone else and become exploited. And now the American dream is stop being exploited, become the exploiter. How do I
so
set up my own business? Right.
libertarians fail because most people who accept a job don't do it because they want to. They do it because they have to, and that's exactly the flaw in that conversation.
Oh, sure.
People don't work at the gas station or at McDonald's or even at Walt Disney World because they want to. They do it because they have to pay their bills, and they're
Yeah.
being exploited every day. And that conversation, to me, I think is ridiculous.
Right, but they say it with such confidence and such fervor, as if there
Well,
is no other reality. But then,
yeah,
my thing is to try to back them into this logical corner that they never think of. It's like so easy to think of its logical conclusion, but they never do it. You
no,
know,
they never do.
they
And it's the same with Republicans. They do the same thing, but with other issues.
Well, yes, and there's an
Yeah.
overlap there. This sort of conservative ethos that they all share, the libertarians and the Republicans. Yeah, they might disagree on a couple issues here and there, but at the end of the day, they virtue signal about individual liberty, about responsibility, about hard work, and all of these things, as if a position outside of that, like if I want a more equitable labor and capital relation, that I'm saying I don't want to work hard, right? Or like I think, if let's say I was running for a crazy something, like if I was running for president, I would introduce the idea of a land grant lottery. Because let's say, for instance, I don't want to get a job at Amazon warehouse, and I don't care if they pay me $17 an hour. I don't care what the minimum wage is. I don't want to do that with my life. I don't want to work at the gas station. I don't want to work at these menial jobs if I don't have skills already, and I don't have the means to acquire them. And in right now, maybe I can go to school. Let's say, for instance, we get free college, great. But for the 4 years I'm going to college, how am I living? Right? Or whatever. And what if I say, you know what? I don't even like this system. This whole game sucks. I would rather eke my existence and grow potatoes off of a chunk of land and go hunt rabbits and fish at the local pond all day and just I don't even care. I'll pickle my vegetables in the winter. I don't care. I don't want to play this game. You don't get that choice. You have to play the game because you can't live on the king's land, without paying dues, and you can't live on private land without paying dues. You know what I mean? So you have to find your way to exploitation in order to escape exploitation. There is no default escape from exploitation, and they never take that into consideration. The
No,
captive
they,
labor force.
and I'd like to add to that I'm growing
Please.
some potatoes in my backyard right now. So
There you go. And you know that it's a little bit tricky, but at the same time, it's also rewarding. But it's
yeah,
also self subsistence, and the fact that we don't even have the option of self subsistence. That's what I'm saying. I would, if I were president. I don't know if you're familiar with the Far Side. Back in the '90s, they had on one of their albums, they had a song called "If I Were President." Anyway, and they would list out all these. Every verse was what they would do as president. But one of the things, in addition to the land grant lottery, would would be because that land grant lottery would necessarily draw people away from the labor force, right? And as people get drawn away from the labor force, wages thusly have to go up. And not everyone's going to go want to live off potatoes in some acreage. You know what I mean? But the other thing I would institute in order to facilitate this crazy dream is like a 50% tax on investment property. So if you don't live in this property, whatever it is, if you don't live there, 50% tax. Like I
I
basically
think so, yeah.
want to make it so that investing in real estate is a moot point, right? And then because here's the thing, if we go trace back the sale receipts far enough, it wasn't bought. It was got by someone who got shot. You know what I mean? It wasn't a paper transaction of dollars and deeds at some point. You know what I mean? So there's no real way to reconcile that other than, like, yeah, if you need a place to live, let's work it all out. Great. Go buy yourself a nice place to live. But everything else, you can't just hoard all this stuff, all this land that is basically commons, like the air, like water. And we've been treating land as if it's like this thing I can put my, wave my hand and say, oh, from here to all we can see, I own that. It's
Yep.
like, well, that's how it was once, and now forever, and all through your family's lineage, now they get this swath of land while people are homeless, and whatever. You know what I mean? So we have to make up for the fundamental flaws of the system. But we know the libertarians, of course, never want to honestly look at the system. Either that or they're not very bright. I honestly can't decide if they're just obfuscating the truth or if they're just so obtuse they don't see it.
Yep. I don't want to isolate anyone who might, potentially want to vote for me. But all I have to say about that is, at the end of the day, the libertarian narrative is how do I say it without being, you know,
Well,
uh,
you
not
might just
conclusive.
have
Okay, so
to
you know
put
what?
it out there
Whatever.
so they can
Screw it.
see
Like,
where they're at. If it, I don't know. You
so
decide how you. I don't know.
you can't not have taxes if you want to have a functioning society.
Sure.
So how are the roads going to get fixed? Uh, who's
Well,
going to help
yeah, they'll
these
say that it'll
people
be
who?
voluntary, and my argument is it's voluntary right now, and you don't do anything. So that's obviously failing in front of our eyes. My
That's exactly right.
yeah, my favorite thing when I hear capitalists and whatever start bitching about a socialism coming and the pandemic and da da da. I'm like, well, hey, this is a perfect chance for capitalism to come in and save the day. Waiting, like how long? Wait, how long are we supposed to wait for this? Are they coming? You know what I mean? Capitalism's here already. It's not like we need to go institute it to save the day. It's here. It's the day is not being saved. Is my point. You know what I mean? And it never dawns on them. Is a thing that I don't get with these either the capitalist sycophants or the libertarians or whoever these people are. But I also can't be too mad at them. They're my brothers and sisters, and they also are the products of conditioning and propaganda.
You have to give it to libertarians, though, is that at least unlike Republicans, they're inclusive of all people. you
Yeah,
know,
right. That's true. I mean, most libertarians I've found to be somewhat pretty open-minded, and they've been a lot less. Like I've had some Republicans probably be a little further down the racial identity line, and libertarians being a bit more open, and that's sort of their, their virtue signal is like, I'm so open that I don't even care, but I also hate taxes, and if you can't make it in society, you should die. It's nature. You know what I mean?
Wow.
And that's the thing is, if you take these Ayn Rand, they literally say stuff like, I think she wrote something, a book called the Virtue of Selfishness. These are people who literally believe selfishness is a virtue. So their perspective on the world is so foreign to me that I engage them, but I can't really understand where they're coming from, and all I can do is try to poke holes in their argument. But their identity is so tied to their ideology, and their egos are so frail that they will just say, you're a doo-doo head, fake news, you know. And that's what I found in my experience trying to sort of pick fights in a way with Ayn Rand type libertarians on purpose, you know.
Yep.
But it's just hard to have a talk about class dynamics when some people have zero either ability or desire to understand it at all from that perspective.
it, I don't think that people want to talk about the hard issues. I think people want to continue going on and living how they do in their little bubble.
But how long can that's how cults are formed, and that's how you get like the Nazis. And
Are we not experiencing that cult like behavior
yeah,
now?
but like here's the thing. This is the part that I always worry about. I'm not a huge student of history, but the more I dig into history, I try to compare to the contemporary. And my thing is, did the German people, for instance, or did the Italians, before Mussolini really got into his groove, did they feel it and see it? And you see like reports of anti-fascists and these people who would fight against those movements. And I was just listening to old Worker Party podcast talking about the Jewish workers in the 1940s who fought for Britain, for the UK or Britain, whatever, and the racism and anti-Semitism and stuff they faced in the UK, and the fact that the UK didn't really go to war to help any Jewish people. They went to war to stop German expansion. And how these narratives are so different and whatever. And I think about the contemporary, and I think if I busted into a Proud Boys meeting and I said I was fighting fascists and I was an anti-fascist and I killed half of the people, like in this hypothetical, right? In the context looking back in World War II, when someone says, yes, they came in and they killed half of the people that were meeting in the fascist meeting, we're heralding them. But if I were to say I went in and busted this fascist meeting and I killed half the people, we're still in a point of our society where there's a big contingent of society who would stand by them and call me the murderer. You see what I mean? So we're in that now. How do you know for sure? Like, how do you become the German in the midst of the Nazi movement saying, what the fuck is going on? What are you doing? You know what I mean? And I think that's where we are. Like you said, look around you, look what you see. I see it, you see it, but we see an acceptance happening within our country. What do you do? Is it now the time to do those crazy things that we hear about in history, where we go break up the fascist meeting?
I think it's happening.
Where are we in this threshold? Or, yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
I think we're in new territory. We're dealing with a global pandemic. People are already, without income. They're on the brink of being homeless, deciding to pay bills or buy food. And then we have these things that happen, unfortunately, which are disgusting. And we have, these people who support it, because they feel that sort of empowerment right now. And, they're taking advantage of these sort of weaknesses in society to advance their narrative. And so, so that's where we're at. But, it's also new territory. But I think, frankly, that we're watching, history unfold right in front of us.
Yes.
And at the end of the day, you know, I personally, and a lot of my friends, are not going to be the people who sit back and let it happen. And so, that's what I say. You know, to speak to these riots is that you know it's unfortunate that businesses are being targeted, but it's much more unfortunate that people's lives are being lost. And on that, speaking to that as well, it's unfortunate that our own president wants to activate our own military against people who are standing up for these sort of things. And in 5 or 10 years from now, people will look back upon this time and not even want to discuss it because of how shocking and divisive it truly is, these times we're living in.
But don't you think that supporters of Trump, or even maybe conservatives, I don't know who you want to label. I mean, to me, the labels come with whatever baggage. But however we can articulate people who are supportive of this action, um, don't they find a way to justify it anyway? And wouldn't they change the narrative? Because again, these are the same people who are disconnected from reality. So it's
Oh
like
yeah,
when you
they
watch
always
the
find a
press,
way to change
whatever the
narrative.
press
Or
secretary's name is, when they ask a question and her answer is not related at all to the question or those kinds of things, and no matter what you say, her reality that she spits back at you is not in line with, you know, the actual universe we live in, but it doesn't matter. And to her fans and supporters and his supporters, it doesn't matter. What do you do in the face of that? Especially, I mean, as someone who's running for an office, how are you going to deal with people who literally like are part of in some cases are part of a death cult? There's people that
I'm
are
going
thinking the
to
apocalypse is coming because of this.
I'm going to, and I always will, and I always have, and I'm going to continue to denounce them. I have no interest in working with you. I don't want to hear your false narratives. The things you do harm people, and I don't I don't want to work with you. I don't want to listen to you talk about it. I don't want any part of it. You're wrong.
Well, what can you like say they're I don't know. They don't care about environmental regulations because they feel like Jesus is going to come and bring the rapture anyway, or things like that, and they're standing in front of you trying to justify inaction because God will find a way, or something like that. I mean, it sounds sort of out there, but there's people that are literally, that are in our president's ear that truly believe these things. I mean, they want to support Israel because they feel like that will bring the rapture, like
Yeah.
literally,
Well,
you know.
you know,
So
this
how
goes
can you
back. It goes
even
back to what I
govern
said
with
earlier.
that,
Like,
kind of
and
thing?
I do have to start wrapping this up, but I'll
Sure,
answer this
absolutely.
question. It goes back to what I said earlier. These people are living in La La Land. they have no real grasp on reality, and these things they're supporting are not the actual nature of what's happening. And at the end of the day, they're all going to feel ashamed and go back into hiding where they were, prior to Donald Trump being elected.
Do you think that there are more people out there that are inactive that will be spurred to motion if the right person emerges? Or
I don't think so.
do you
I
think that
I
all the active people are active as it is?
I think that too many. I I think that too many people feel disenfranchised, and for the right reasons. And so I think it's going to take a long time, and not just one specific person, but a lot of people to sort of build that trust.
Mm. Do you think that these people can do it within a system that's almost made to make sure they don't?
I think so. Yes, I think that, and to some extent, I agree that it is stacked against people, and it's going to take a lot of years and a lot of people to build that trust. And I don't think we're on the right track at all.
Hmm. Well, hopefully you'll be. Yeah. Now you're still. Are you in office now and running again, or what's?
I'm a first time candidate.
Oh,
I'm
first time
not in
candidate.
office right
Okay.
now. I'm
Okay.
I'm running for office. I'm I'm a my experience in politics is pretty much activism. In 2016, I started a not for profit which raised money to pay for people to go to rehab with opioid addictions because Mike Pence was totally ignoring the opioid problem in Indiana.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Pretty much all of my activism has been a direct result of Mike Pence and the things he's done. Um, but yeah, I'm tired of sitting back and watching my friends and my family struggle. While people like my opponent continue to speak to their constituents and then vote the exact opposite of the things they need. And I think that's where we're at in America is, these party lines. And, I have Republican friends and I will work across the aisle anytime I can. But right now, that is something that's not happening. And it's truly a shame because, you know, people are in dire situations. And, we can't keep sitting back and watching while this struggle gets worse.
Absolutely. Before you go, what words of advice do you have for the? We got a few people listening now. Like if someone feels like they are frustrated, they want to make a difference, they want to get involved. What's probably first step you would say?
Find someone you believe in and support them, either by volunteering or by donating, or even just if you want to share something they post. In addition to that, you know, go to a rally, go to a protest, speak your voice, meet other people there, and make like-minded friends.
Mm,
Because if you feel these problems, you need to do something about it. And what better way than to become involved?
absolutely. Right, and you
And
also, I mean, what better way of sort of getting over feeling loneliness or alienation than to find fellowship with someone else that has a similar cause or some resonance between you and them. So if you go there, obviously you both care about something. You know what I mean? Of that shared value.
exactly, and I promise you, there was someone out there who is exactly, like you in the same mindset. And there are so many people, including myself right now, who feel alienated and disheartened by our current state of affairs. And exactly why I, as a 30-year-old, am running for office. So, you
That's
know,
amazing. I think that you are going to be. I mean, I know that we've got a few folks on now. I'm sure, just out of the couple people, just talking to you, hearing that your passion and your intrinsic want for change, I think that's going to make people feel more hope that there are actually people that are running for office that aren't crooks and scoundrels that actually care. And I almost let me get this. I mean, let me ask you this: have you always dreamed about politics, or is this sort of like out of frustration?
I was forced into politics,
There you go.
living in Indiana,
Right.
being the only openly gay male in my town, and having these religious freedom laws passed
Wow.
that targeted me. I don't know if you've heard of Memories Pizza in Indiana, but it was national news.
Yeah,
That
I
this
vaguely
girl
remember that.
Crystal.
Yes.
I went to school with Crystal, and seeing the news that day and seeing her on the news talking about how they're not going to serve their pizzas at gay weddings,
Hmm.
it is what inspired me to become politically involved in the very first place. And I would like to add that their pizza is not that great, and no wedding, let alone a gay wedding, would ever want their pizza served
Oh
there.
wow. Right.
And so it's just one of those things where people felt empowered,
Right.
because they had. But I have first, I had someone, and trigger warning, uh, and excuse my language,
No,
but
dude, go for it. We have a
I've
tough
had people call
audience.
me a cock gobbling faggot.
Oh wow.
Uh, I had a guy call me that once, and he put his hands on me and was being aggressive, and
Wow.
so I literally, to protect myself, had to break his nose. Like, that is
What?
the environment that I grew up in because of people like Mike Pence
Wow.
and the direct result of the actions he took as a politician. And so, thank Mike Pence for me running for office.
Well, and I think that one last thing that one of the things that is probably that's going to resonate between you and the people, and then is probably going to be a common thing between you and other candidates that are going to get popular support, is almost a reluctancy to serve. Like, you're not in it to win it as far as personal gain through power and politicking for the sake of politics. It's not a game that you're shrewdly
No,
playing for fun. This isn't House of Cards or something where you're trying to, play 4D chess for the sake of playing politics. It's, we got issues. You guys are fucking up. I'm tired of this shit, in a way.
language, and trigger warning again, but I want to hold these motherfuckers as accountable, and
Yeah,
that's why I'm running.
absolutely, man. That's exciting, and it's people like you. Erin decided she wants to run because of the actions you're taking. You've become an inspiration to her, and now she's excited about the chance of being able to represent a constituency, because she doesn't have anything that she wants to gain, and she's just sick of crap and sitting around complaining about it or whatever. And I think, what do you? Well, we can talk about this at some point, and hopefully, more and more people will start to see that maybe their destiny is somewhere in leadership. If they feel the frustration, if they feel the hurt, the pain, that they get up and be that voice, and they can actually do it. Like you, was there a point where you didn't know if you had the confidence to do it? It must take a lot of confidence
Now,
to try to do that.
but I don't even know if I am a leader, but I am most certainly a fighter. And so, a month ago when I entered this race, I the day after that gave a speech to a friendly group, and I was not confident at all. I'd never done this before,
Hmm.
but every day that goes on, this fire burns inside of me even more, and I cannot wait to debate my opponent and to
Wow.
take him down.
How
And
cool.
even a month ago, this call would have been a struggle to me. And I feel more confident than ever now because I know I'm doing the right thing. And I'm not a leader, but I'm a fighter.
Well, you know,
And I'm,
leaders
I'm not
leaders
going to tell a
emerge. You
happy to
know.
lead. I'm not trying to lead my
Yes.
constituents. I'm
Yes.
trying to fight for them.
Well, you know, I'm not a very well versed student, but I'm a new student to Taoism. I'm not a Taoist by any means, but I'm reading some stuff by Lao Tzu or whatever, the Tao, and he has a couple lines that I'm gonna butcher, but the premise is that a master, the true leader, uh, basically the group accomplishes what they accomplish, and like nobody knows that the leader accomplished it all. They thought they did it themselves. You know what I mean? You lead without leading, in a way, and you end up becoming the ultimate leader. It does. I don't know if that makes sense, because you know, in some ways, it's like Bernie, right, where he's this leader, but he keeps trying to shed it off to it's us. And you're an example of that. You're like, you know, it is us. I'm gonna make a difference, and here you are stepping up. So by even stepping up at all, you become the leader, if that makes sense. You know what I mean?
It
So
makes sense,
so
you
you're
know, like
not
my
there. There's no question about whether you're the leader. You've been able to raise your hand and make that move. So you already are. It's just a matter of, can you articulate your vision, inspire others, and bring them towards that common goal. And it sounds like you're on your way already. I'm
yeah,
I'm
I
I'm
think so too.
yeah, I'm rooting for you, man.
Well, you know, thank you so much, and thank you for having me tonight and for speaking the truths about the
Absolutely.
really, honestly, stark state of affairs that we're living in.
The only way
Um,
that what's the first step to breaking an addiction or rehab or whatever, right? We have to recognize what's happening around us, and if we put our head down in the sand, you know, then we just have our butts in the air, I guess. I don't know, but we can't do that. There's no way to live, you know.
I'm
So
tired of that shit. I see
absolutely,
people do it all the time. I'm tired of it.
yes.
And, I'm running for office to, hold these people accountable and to fight for my constituents, you know, many of whom are on the brink of, personal disaster. And, I think it speaks volume, again, that, 22.4% of my county's children don't know where the next meal will come from. And yet my
Wow.
opponent keeps voting against funding school lunch programs, things like that. So
Wow.
that's why I'm running. This is America, and in America, you know, things like that should not exist.
Yeah,
And
well, it's crazy. America really has to reckon with what it even means to be America or an American or the American experience. You know, in some of these, like I keep bringing up libertarians because they're sort of the extreme example, but at their logical conclusion to their ideology with no government intervention is basically social Darwinism. And you know, as the to reach equilibrium, eventually some of these kids will die, and we'll have enough food for everybody, and yay. And they don't even see the sociopathic nature of their premise. You know what I mean? To them, it's like a fantasy ideology that doesn't no child actually going to starve because of this. And then when the children starve, it's like, oh well, it's not my kid.
yep, exactly. Just like that's not my brother or sister or cousin being shot and killed by the police. So,
Yes, right. And there's always an excuse why it's different than me. But
but seriously,
it's crazy.
thank
Yeah,
you. Thank you so
absolutely.
much for having me.
Every
And
Tuesday, 9 p.m., the show is on this channel. You can Skype in at any time. If there's an issue you want to bring up or champion or anything you want to announce, you can come on the show. We can talk about it. And please, by all means, spread the show around. It's not even about trying to build the show for the show. as you can see, we had a live audience the whole time, and they were just sort of more listening. Someone did talk about left libertarianism, about the freedom, I guess, of libertarianism without social Darwinism. We didn't really dig deep into that, but really they weren't getting too deep into it. But sometimes, as our what's it called? The audience gets bigger. The whole thing about this is how do we wade as a group through the bullshit, and I just try to sort of facilitate that. So it's really not about James Boyd's knowing everything or some stupid crap like that. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
Please, by all means, bring your issues or bring whatever questions, discussions. And like I said, I've been itching to battle some libertarians, etc. So if you run into some and they're getting on your nerves and they want to battle and debate, send them my way.
I think I know the perfect one, but
Yes.
I will talk to you privately about that. So.
Okay. Send them my way. If I have to be nice to them, I can be nice. If you want me to be extra dickish, it's my nature. So that will happen easily.
She's my friend, so be
there
nice. But
I can also be
we'll
very
talk
nice.
privately about that. So.
I'm working on that aspect of my demeanor, because I can never reach a broader audience if I'm constantly insulting them. So
yeah.
So I have to work on that, but I am, little by little. But yes. So anyway, thank you so much for coming on, and yes, you're welcome at any time.
Thank you for having me, and I hope you have a great evening. And give all my best to Erin. I'm looking forward to working with her in Tallahassee. So.
Heck yeah! All right, man. Well, thank you very much, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.
Yep. Have a good night. Bye.
All right, guys. So Jared was on. I hope you guys enjoyed a little bit of exposure into some local politics stuff. Remember, if you are feeling this sort of like unease and this frustration bottled up, like you need to make a change, you want to make a difference, get out there and go run for something.net. They'll list all the down ballot positions that are open that need a challenger, or that they can back as a challenger to whoever the incumbent is. Get on there, run for something. Why not? Change some shit. You got a cause that you want to champion, things like that. Then get out there and do the damn thing. So, all right. So, hold on, let me turn this down. Sep Rock Beats means we are coming to the end of another episode of The Void. I want to thank you guys for tuning in. Remember, like, subscribe. We need to get more people involved. Not that 3 or 4 that we're watching isn't enough, but just to get, let's get our buddies, everyone in to wade through the shit. Remember, this is all a fellowship of truth, trying to figure out what the fuck is going on. What the fuck is going on? Alright, so, Sep Rock Beats on the track, and until next time, I'm out. Your host, James Boyd, the Boyd, and it's like that. Peace out. Peace out. Peace out. Oh, I guess not yet. Peace out yet. I need one of these. What do you call it? Live producers. This is messed up.
handle.